As we have previously noted, the military chaplaincy, Christian military chaplaincy, represents an immense issue in the Christian churches, in the Catholic Church. It is so complex in terms of its consequences, its evil consequences, that it's hard to simply wrap your mind around what are its consequences, what are its implications for the Catholic community. It has often been said by bishops, what am I going to do? I have people in my diocese, hundreds of them, thousands of them maybe, who are in the military. Do I leave them without chaplains? And so the apparent conundrum is set up. They're in there. I now must give them chaplains because Christians deserve chaplains. Well, maybe a way of looking at this is to first examine the negligence of the bishop. Would these people of his diocese be in the military if he had properly taught from grammar school through high school and in the seminary training of the priest a full and complete understanding of both traditions, small t, in the Catholic Church, ethical traditions. There is the tradition of Jesus' nonviolent love of friends and enemies that is original Christianity, that dates back 2,000 years. And then there is approximately the 1,700-year-old tradition of justifying violence and enmity, which has its standards, which is in the context of Catholic or Christian moral theology, and whose standards are pretty darn strict and have to be lived, or else the killing that goes on in the war is unjust killing, murder. And murder is always intrinsically evil. But there is hardly a person, hardly one, boy or girl, who comes out of Catholic primary and secondary school who has been involved in primary or secondary CCD in his parishes, religious education, who has the slightest comprehension of either Orthodox Catholic tradition, the nonviolent way of Jesus, or the just war way introduced by Augustine. They're simply not taught. There's a wave of the hand to gospel nonviolence in Catholic teaching by teaching anecdotal stories about Dorothy Day or Martin Luther King, perhaps even Gandhi. And that's what's taught. As regards Catholic just war tradition, all that's taught is that there is such a thing as a just war in the Catholic Church, and you have to uphold the standards of it, period. If anything about the standards are mentioned, all that's said is, well, you know, it means you have to have a just cause and it has to be instituted by legitimate authority, the war, and they have to use just means, proportional means. That's more or less it. When information is presented in that haphazard, superficial way, when education takes place in that haphazard, superficial way, it's worse than if nothing was said at all. Because it gives the person the impression that he or she knows something, when in fact they don't know it. At least if they did not know it, they could go out and they could look for themselves as adults. What is this nonviolent tradition in the church? What is this just war tradition in the church? But instead, they're given these amorphous thoughts on both subjects and left to fend for themselves. This is because the bishop permits that. The bishop is the teacher in a Catholic diocese, and he has the responsibility of teaching the entire ethical tradition of the church and teaching it properly and well to the level of the student that is in front of him or his deputies. I remember really being so sorrowful, so passionately upset after the quote-unquote war on Grenada, the only war in the history of the United States where there were more medals given out than there were people who participated, where hospitals were bombed and absolutely no reference whatsoever to just war standards in war or during war, nothing. I remember reading the homily of a bishop in a diocese for a 19-year-old boy who was in the military, who was killed in that war and was brought home to be buried. And the bishop said the Mass of the resurrection for him. And he gave this homily that was nothing short of disgusting spiritually. He spoke of how this young man gave his life for freedom, security, defending our country. Never once mentioning the fact that this young man had not been given by the bishop the slightest understanding of the Catholic teaching of nonviolent love of friends and enemies, or even the Catholic teaching of just war theory. He was a kid, 18 years old, that went in and was dead at 19. How dare the bishop talk like that? He was just being a patriotic morale booster, trying to make people feel good by focusing on the ephemeral rather than the eternal. You know, most of the people that go into war, into the military, kids, 18, 19, 20, 21, young, you know. There are not a heck of a lot of graduates from Harvard going into the Army, you know, to be combat veterans and so forth. But most of them are kids. All you have to do is look at the Michael Moore documentary on Marines recruiting in poor sections of the country, and all the gimmicks and deceit they use to bring kids that have no jobs, no education, into the military to be cannon fodder. Let me tell you something that's a scientific fact. The human brain is not totally developed until a human being is 24 years old. When people are recruited at 18, 19 years old by the military, whether it be in Catholic schools or whether it be in public schools or whether it be on the television or the radio, When people 18 and 19 years old are being recruited and brought into the military, they are people that do not have complete, fully developed brains. And the part of the brain that's not developed is that part that can weigh consequences. That's why, a couple of years ago, Allstate Insurance Company put out an advertisement. Parents were concerned why they were paying extra in insurance for their children until they were 24 years old. Why? They were driving the same car on the same streets. They had their licenses. Allstate put out this very, very well done advertisement. What it was a picture of the brain. And in the middle of the brain, there was a big black spot drawn like an automobile, a hole drawn like an automobile. And the advertisement said, why do we charge people between 16 and 24 extra money for insurance as if they had no brains? And the answer was, they have brains, but their brains are not fully developed. And what they were pointing out was that that section of the brain that can judge consequences, that will keep a person from darting in and out in traffic, that will keep people from going well over the speed limit to crazy, keep people from playing chicken in a car, keep people from doing all kinds of things driving, that if they just could get to understand the consequences of driving a 3,000-pound vehicle at 60 or 20 or even 10 miles an hour, how disastrous that could be, but they can't. So Allstate has to charge them more money because the statistics are that people at that age group don't use a brain that they don't have. But these are the people the military go after. The uniforms, the music, the glory. And of course, they're allowed to do it in Catholic schools as well as public schools. This is cooperation in child abuse. Straightforward cooperation in child abuse. This is like a child who's 4 years old putting a bag of candy out in the middle of a highway and telling the child to go out and get it. He or she will go out and get it eventually because the attraction of the candy. But they do not have the mental competence and experience to understand that you walk out on that highway and you are putting yourself in a position of being run over. Or they don't understand the probability of it. They just don't understand what's going on. And so you come before 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and you put a carrot out there for them. The uniform, the glory, learning a trade is another one. Whatever the case may be, college tuition. And then you get them in. And of course, it's utterly different than the parade and the music and the military uniforms and the hero movies. And this is what the Catholic Church, the Christian churches, the military chaplaincy becomes an arm of. Deceiving people who are easily deceived because their brains are not fully developed into partaking in something that they do not and cannot completely understand what it is. I would submit to you, how many Catholic schools, how many Catholic CCD programs, even at the high school level, even at the college level, even at the seminary level, show people, appraise the students of the realities of war. I mean, really appraise them like educators can. The military chaplaincy is intricate to that whole process. Why, at the beginning of the Iraq War in 2003, the head of Catholic military chaplains was running around the country recruiting for the war at all kinds of Catholic gatherings. And then when they get in there, now listen to this, when the Catholic gets into the military, the Catholic chaplain never takes the group of Catholics who are coming in at that time, whatever it might be, or into his unit or whatever, never takes them, sits them down and says, here is what the just war theory is that has to be adhered to strictly, that's the Catholic teaching, strictly on every condition, or else you cannot kill a human being. Strictly on every condition in what's called ad bellum, that is about the starting of the war, and in bello, that's about how you conduct yourself in war. No, there is absolutely no presentation to Catholics coming into the military by the Catholic chaplains there, or any Christian chaplains, regarding the standards of the just war theory, let alone the teachings of Jesus and Jesus' teaching of nonviolent love of friends and enemies. What kind of chaplaincy is this? Beyond that, Catholic chaplains and Christian chaplains are prohibited from doing that. This is not their own choice. They are prohibited. So they are double agents. Agents of a warring state, agents of Christ. How do you serve those two masters? You can only choose one at a time. So you let the young men and the young women go on and learn how to kill and learn how to maim and learn how to deceive. And not a word. And they don't even have a fully developed brain. What kind of chaplaincy is this? What kind of bishop is this that would let his youngsters, his Catholic youngsters, go into that kind of dynamic, that kind of turmoil? You know, I said the problem of the military chaplaincy was immense. The spiritual and moral problems of the military chaplaincy is immense. And therefore, one of the possibilities that we have as an excuse that people are using, it's so immense, what can we do about it? There's so many Catholics in the military. The answer is abolish it. It's the only solution. It serves no purpose that the church should be serving, which is to be an extension of Christ in time and space. The only solution is abolish it. But what about all those people who are already in the military? All those Catholics, all those Christians. Fess up to them. Tell them what the teachings of Jesus are. Tell them the impossible complexity of a human being a military chaplain and being a double agent for the state and for Christ. The impossibility of the job. And all the compromises, concessions, deceits that have to be engaged in order to carry out that double agency. Robert J. Lifton was a psychiatrist during the Korean War. And he became a full professor of psychiatry for decades at Harvard University. He did years and years of research into the chaplaincy in the psychiatric profession in war. And he wrote a book, Home from War. Well worth anyone, including the bishops and the priests and the ministers and the deacons, that have any interest in being authentic in their pastoral care of young people, to read and read thoroughly. Here is an excerpt, somewhat lengthy, but it's an excerpt from this book, Home from War, by Robert J. Lifton. The book is the product of tens of thousands of interviews with people who have been in war and who have come back. And here's what he says. Within their diffused anger, the veterans reserve a special tone to describe that all I can do is describe as ironic rage for two categories of people they encountered in the military: the chaplains and the shrinks. The very mention of a military chaplain quickly brought forth smirks, jibes, the kind of uneasy laughter suggested by the half-conscious witticism, "Those chaplains, oh my God." With bitter enthusiasm, they gave endless examples of chaplains blessing the troops, their mission, their guns, their killing. As one of the men put it, whatever we were doing, murder, atrocities, God was always on our side. The men also pointed to the chaplain's even more direct role in promoting false witness. One man spoke especially bitterly of, quote, the chaplain's continuing bullshit, which he went on to illustrate what he meant, recalling a death of a close buddy, followed by a funeral service in the company. The homily was nothing more than a pep talk that urged the soldiers, in the name of the one who had been killed, to kill more of them, meaning the enemy. When this man finally went to the chaplain, he was overwrought with anger at what he had just heard, almost to the point of beating up the chaplain. He was near psychotic disassociation. He yelled out to the chaplain, "What kind of sin do I have to commit? How far along the path of evil that you, the representative of God, are leading me, do I have to go before I can get you, the spiritual counselor, to listen to what the seriousness of my problem is?" The veterans were trying to say to me that the only thing worse than being ordered by military authorities to participate in the absurd evil of war is to have that evil rationalized and justified by the guardians of their spirit. Chaplains thus fulfill the function of helping men adjust to committing war crimes, while lending their spiritual authority to the overall project of war. I know that there would be all kinds of responses to that would simply be, oh, I got this help from a chaplain, I got that help from a chaplain. In combat, the problem is this. Listen. The chaplain is the protector, the last line of protection of the immortal soul of the person. War can destroy the body. And even if it doesn't destroy the body, it can do something far, far worse. It can destroy the inside of a person, the psyche, the soul of a person. And that's where the chaplain comes in. He is supposed to be the protector of that in the name of Jesus Christ, not the agent of destruction of both body and soul of those in his care. We now know, we have a term for it, PSTD, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And of course, it's epidemic. We have 22 suicides of veterans a day. God knows how many others there are that are reported as such. We have hospitals filled to the brim with people who have become unfunctionable psychologically and spiritually in terms of war and in total misery. And then we have the back alleys in the streets of the big cities, the homeless shelters. Men whose minds and spirits and psyches and souls were torn apart by the reality of what they had to go into under the name of Jesus Christ. And when they got there, they knew as sure as the hand in front of them that this was not of God, this was not of Jesus, but the only help they got from the chaplain was, buck up, don't be a coward, don't be a sissy. Much like Pat O'Brien, the fighting 69th movie after World War I, preparing people for World War II as a priest, as a military chaplain. The same kind of invigorating rah-rah speech. The keeping people in the misery of World War I. That he gave as Newt Rockne in the story Newt Rockne, All-American. A pep speech. Go out and kill more of them. You're doing God's work. The human being is overwhelmed with death guilt, with murder guilt, with death anxiety. The author of Tales of South Pacific, from which the play, the musical South Pacific came, James Michener, reports the first time in the Second World War that he actually killed a person. He says that when the Japanese person came over, whatever, the top of the dugout or wherever they were, wherever he was, foxhole, and he killed them, as he was trained to do, and he killed them, He vomited all over himself, and instantly, at the deepest part of him, he felt he had betrayed everything that he was. That's just not his experience. That's the experience of millions and millions and millions of people on all sides of war. But the military chaplain in the church, as his employer, sends him out to validate all that, right up front and close. He is the last possible protector of the spirit of the person, the mind of the person, the soul of the person, from it being destroyed for life. And instead, he performs a liturgy that validates what they're about to do. As, by the way, the chaplains on the other side are doing the same thing. The military chaplaincy is an immense human problem, an immense spiritual problem for the churches, an immense moral problem. It is toying with salvation of one and all. There is no way to gradually get out of it. It's wrong from the beginning, as the just war is wrong from the beginning. And it should be, and must be, eliminated, because it is participation in terrible, horrible evil in relationship, for the most part, to young men and women that have no idea what they're getting into and what they are in.